We're diving deep into deep conversations here on Let's Talk About the Deep Stuff. I'm your host, Sean Kneese, and I've been on a bit of hiatus with this show. I think my last episode was about a month ago, and that actually kind of relates to the topic I want to get into today with my friend Eric Sanchez, who is my guest today. We're talking about finding motivation when you're feeling stuck or if you're not feeling motivated or you're feeling kind of shitty. Like, how do you keep going with that, and how do you find meaning, like your meaning or your purpose in life? How do you stay on that through the good and bad times, or when you feel you're not feeling so good about everything? So I guess for me, like, I'm someone with multiple creative passions, and this podcast is one of them. Writing's another, acting, and those are things that I'm kind of pursuing, and I I feel motivated to do, and I feel like those are things that align with my purpose. And I guess a lot of times sometimes I'm like lose motivation, or I lack like a focus with it, and I feel like, oh, what's the point? I keep going with this, like, where do I want to take it? But I know it in my heart, like it's what I'm meant to do, and it's something I need to stay on, and I need to get more
Yeah.
centered with. But I guess
Sometimes, yeah.
it's something it could be challenging to keep going with. Do you have what's your experience?
Yeah, no. And what I was going to say, literally right now, I so much of me wanted to just cancel doing this right now because I'm not really feeling 100% because I have been in the midst of a bunch of like creative pursuits and have had um, some things go well, but my brain is wired to focus on the parts that don't go so well. So I've had like a few days where I've just been so out of it and trying to bring myself just back to some level of just feeling okay that I thought about doing this. I was like, this is just, I don't want to be a downer. I don't want to also just pretend. I have no energy to like fully like mask and just pretend like everything's all right when it's not, and then talk about something, just trying to like lean into things being positive when at the moment there's parts of me that just doesn't feel that, and I'm just like I've burned so much energy recently and doing that I just felt like I didn't have that in me. But I realized that sometimes, and I have given myself a few days of just sort of like laying low and just trying to um, you know a little self-care and do some stuff that's like restorative for me. But also having something like this come up, I realized that it's actually in sometimes the solution, at least like right now, is to engage honestly in something creative with other people that involves saying, I don't really feel great, and that's okay. Sometimes those blocks and losing that motivation, it's like the solution isn't to feel better to be motivated. It's like to do the thing even though you feel like shit. And
No.
that, at least in past experience too, has really given that give my brain or the process just like a different angle. It's like, wow, like something's like we only do the things when we feel good about them and want to. It's like, well, I feel shit and I'm like shit and I'm doing it anyway. And it's like maybe part of the brain's like, so we feel good now?
Yeah,
I'm like, maybe. It's like,
yeah.
so
And
we
it's
feel
it's
good now.
also only showing people your best too, like on
Yeah.
social media and everything. People only show like their best, them at their
Yeah.
best, or when they're at their happiest, like they're living the life. And a lot of people who would do a show like mine would kind of only talk about the good aspects of
Yeah.
who they are and everything. And I've done some solo episodes where I've gotten vulnerable about some of my shortcomings and the times I fucked up and how I've learned from
Yeah.
it. And I just think that, at least for me, that I'm kind of drawn to that more when someone is honest about, maybe I'm not always okay. Maybe I
Yeah.
don't always know
Yeah.
exactly where I'm going with this, or maybe I do have times where I feel stuck. Like, I know what my purpose is, I know what I'm driven to do, but sometimes you
Yeah.
just lose that motivation, or you lose that
Yeah.
focus. And of
Or I
course,
think,
writing things out and having concrete goals about them can help.
yeah.
Getting yourself into a mindset where you talk about manifestation and everything, the
Yeah.
whole like living as if you already have what you want and coming from an abundance mindset instead of a lacking
Yeah.
mindset. But it's hard to always stay in that. Sometimes you do feel
Yeah.
shitty. Sometimes you do feel like, what's the point of anything I'm doing? And
100%. In case, for me, what's hard is that, if something is 80% fantastic and 20% disappointing, it's the way my brain is wired. It really locks into that like 20%. And it takes a lot for me to get out of that. And it takes a lot for me to even recognize that that's happening, because one thing that I've learned is that whether it be immaturity or it be coping mechanisms or whatever it is, there's some parts, at least in my case, and I think a lot of people from our upbringings, that we have like almost like reflexes, automatic responses to situations that we don't even aren't fully aware of. And so when those kick in, they're kind of stronger than the other ones. So for instance, if I've recently working like really really hard towards something, and there's parts that went really well, there's parts that were difficult in unexpected ways, and it's really hard for me to shake off the bad feelings from that part. But that's my reflex. That's like my brain just like latches on to the parts that didn't go well. So it's doubly difficult in a way to say I've applied all the manifesting. In fact, this is the result of whether it be focused, hard work, lists, goals, manifesting, all those things. And I'm now in this space where those are happening. It's not just a dream, it's in practice, it's real, and I'm doing it. And then all of a sudden, some aspect of that goes in a way that I wasn't expecting, in a way that is, even like hurtful or disappointing. Now all of a sudden, my mind wants to say, all of your efforts were for nothing. All of that,
yeah,
all
I
everything
can
that led
relate
up
to
to
that same
there
thing.
that felt great. That journey was really, I'm basically retconning my successes as failures, and it's a terrible thing to do. It's really not fair to myself and or anyone that I'm like, participating with. But that's the reflex that my brain has to say, like, not only is this part bad, but everything that's led up to here is bad. That's a horrible way to think. That's
Yeah,
terrible. That's
and
not fair.
I've even had times where I'm kind of like, what am I even doing and everything, and then I've had people say to me, "Oh, it looks like you're doing great, man. You got this show, you're doing this or doing that. Seems like you're
Yeah,
pursuing what you want." And I guess from an outside perspective, other people don't look at your flaws and your failures as much as
yeah,
you do. And the people
and
that have been successful at what they do, they've had many failures on the way too. And
yeah,
so,
absolutely. And that's, I mean, so one thing that's come up a lot too as a theme over this last trip, it's something that comes up in programming, but I say a lot, but I think you'll probably understand by explaining. And it's like error messages are your friends, and that means that like when you're coding and you are um, basically you create some sort of error, and the program you're building or making doesn't work, and so it feels like a mistake, and you'll get an error message that says here's what the mistake is. Sometimes it's very cryptic and it's hard to understand, but it's an error message, and it feels like a failure and you feel stuck. But it's like those are your friends, because those are illuminating the areas in which something was wrong, and helping you see what you need to fix. And the goal is with that you would understand that, resolve that issue, and then learn to try to avoid that for the next time, until you hit another error message, and then the process continues. And the goal, and a lot of like engineering is like what you win by solving problems is get to solve more complex problems. Your goal isn't to never have problems. Your goal is to be better at solving these kind of problems. It's really hard when there's an emotional connection to that. It's really hard when perhaps you are thinking this is like my future, or this is resolving, feeling like balancing out some like trauma from the past or whatever it might be. But the idea is that running into those problems in and of themselves shouldn't be another problem for you so much as they really could be looked at as a place that shows you the parts that you can improve on. Um, but it's difficult. It's difficult when you are in it yourself. It's difficult when you don't have that outside perspective. right? Because you get consumed by it almost. There was a time over last week where talk about like if it were error messages, but imagine it's like I can't even see it anywhere, just like all consuming. And I don't have any of the tools around me that are my usual, like, oh, take a break, walk away, reassess, experience something else, come back. Instead, it's like sometimes it can build up, and there's a, you know, it's what's there's a term, there's a saying
It kind
sometimes.
of all the negative stuff kind of amplifies and
Yeah, yeah. And
your
it's like
mind. Yeah,
seeing. It's like the opposite of. Have you ever heard? There's a term.
opposite of rose tinted glasses.
Yes.
That's
Shit.
well,
Shit
and you
tinted
know that
glasses. Yeah.
yeah,
No,
because
literally.
and for
That's what I was
me
gonna say. Yeah.
yeah, and for me I mean I know another thing we were going to get to. We'll get to that a little bit later about how using certain ways to constructive versus non-constructive ways to deal with the negative mindset.
Yeah.
For me, more recently, the past few years, I learned that I need um, some kind of of course, I can do my own things to get out of negative states, but I've also found that I personally need some kind of medication that helps me with the negative thoughts and the depression
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
because I mean a lot of it's biochemical for me
Sure.
too. But
That's
I definitely get into and I've described it that way before. It's kind of like reverse of rose tinted glasses. You're only seeing all the shit, none of the
yeah. It's a
positive.
shit.
Like
Shit.
I'll
Shit
go
tinted
out to
glasses.
a social event. I'll meet new people, and there's a couple people that seem like they didn't like me or they got the wrong vibe about me.
Yeah.
And then there's these other people that I had really good interactions with, but my mind will just focus on, oh, these
Mm-hmm.
certain people didn't seem to like me. Like,
Yeah.
why? What's wrong with me? I must be this, or I must
Yeah.
come off this way. And my mind's totally missing the positive that happened.
Yeah. It's. I literally. So one of the. I could both talk about medication, but also the looping mindset. I had to spend like. Okay. So going back to like we have these responses. So I've been learning recently, like we're not we are responsible for our responses, but they're more like reflexes. So we cannot be hard on ourselves for that reflex initially. But what we can do is learn the ways in which to handle how we respond once that reflex is triggered, and basically get down to our baseline as swiftly, as efficiently as possible. We're not denying stuff, not rushing it, not lying to ourselves, but not staying in it, right? So one of the things that I had to do, which I realized is that I just could not break this um, response that I thought that I had to like write up and like to respond to like a situation. And in my mind, I'm like crafting this message over and over and going through all these painful things. And I could not get myself to stop. So what I needed, all I could do is I just started counting on the steps I was taking. So I'm walking with Dana, we're walking in a beautiful park. My mind is like going. So it's just like every step, I'm just like 1, 2, 3. And I would catch myself getting back into that statement. It's just like, all right, back to it. And just keep counting because I don't need to resolve this, but I need my brain to have some space. That part of our everything's sort of in there in our brains. There's subconscious, conscious, whatever, but there's that part
Yeah.
that is going to like ruminate, it's going to obsess, it's going to whatever. And I know that the solution isn't going to be through replaying those thoughts all the time, but there's that part in me that almost cannot do anything else but that. So since I can't like even just think positive or don't worry about it,
Yeah.
I
Well,
just
and
had
you
to
can't
distract
stop the thoughts
myself.
from coming in, and if
Yeah,
you try to stop them, you're just repressing something. So it's something
exactly.
that needs to be looked at. You need to look at the negative thoughts and where they come
Yeah.
from, and
But I couldn't. The thing is, I know that I have it in me to. I don't want to repress it, but I also can't engage in it that much right now. So the most, because I wasn't coming at it from a healthy point of view, but I can't. I can't tell myself to pretend it doesn't exist. So the most neutral thing I can do is just count. What's counting? Doesn't hurt.
so
I'm
kind of
taking steps.
separating yourself from
Yeah.
the negative thoughts.
Yeah.
That you're like, okay, it comes, but that I'm just thinking that because of this past experience. What is the reality of the situation? Is it really the way I see it, or is that just my negative filter?
Yeah. So there's yeah, okay. So and that is a really good point, and it's hard to see the reality when you are in the heightened emotional part. And I know that if I give myself some space, I can review the same scenario, but
Mm-hmm.
without the obsessive part, lets me actually see
Yeah.
it more clearly. And in order to get there, I need to both not engage or deny it. And that's where just giving myself just the neutral space of just counting was like, okay, I'm not gonna and there's other ways, things people can do
Yeah,
too,
like
but I'm
breathing
not.
exercises,
Yeah,
another thing too.
exactly.
Yeah.
But something that is neutral, something that is telling my brain, I'm not denying this. I'm not saying this isn't important to think about. I'm not saying something's okay when it's not okay. I'm not pretending anything. There's no sort of like sense of like repressing something. But I also know that right now, the way that I feel isn't going to give me the best results by engaging in these thoughts. So what can I do? Just give myself some space, knowing that I can revisit this. I'm not denying myself the ability to revisit later. And in fact, I'm saying if I can give myself some space, I could revisit this and have a better solution than staying within that reaction. But I need to get there. So that sort of neutral space just gives me like a break from that level of engagement and obsession to wanting to actually solve it. And over that space, I feel that, I could come up with a better solution than I could if I just try and stay with it where I was. And yeah, there's lots of ways to, do that. Like I said, breathing exercises, counting, or people have just, mantras or listening
And
to music or whatever,
yeah. And
but
you think
it's,
that, I think there's also a balance between, and I've talked about this before on the show. There's a balance between the extreme highs and extreme lows, like having an
yeah,
extremely high opinion of how everything's going, and then
yeah,
extremely low. I think the reality and the more consistent happiness is looking in the middle and
yeah.
having the more realistic, balanced view. Because then
So
you can't, if you go too high up, then you're going to crash. And
yeah, that's 100% true. And in fact, that's very difficult for me, but I know that. And so, I don't know if we could see it that well, but so this is the tarot card imagery for temperance. Temperance
we have
is,
that tattooed on your arm for those who
yeah,
can't see. We
that
have
is
the
like the
temperance
biggest, I
tarot
love
tattoo.
the imagery. And that is like my reminder of one of the most difficult but truest places for me to be. It feels like an artificial, almost unreal emotion to find that middle space sometimes and operate from there. And I do struggle with that a lot. And being in one extreme or the other, even if they are um, not the kind to maybe necessarily act out on that. So you might look at someone and be like, "Oh, he's being so extreme," but like internally, I can feel like very like weighted in one direction or another, and I have to find that middle space. And that temperance isn't about denying or obsessing, or it's about truly finding like that balance. And it's not necessarily easy to get into that space genuinely. It's easy to blow up on one emotion. It's easy to repress or deny something, but that true middle space is doesn't and it doesn't come naturally to me. So I have to sort of be aware that I need to find it, and then kind of do what I need to do in my practices to like give myself that space to see
And
things
you
from that.
mentioned you have more than one creative pursuit, and that I think that's the case with a lot of creative people. And I think for me, like there's always been many things I like, and more recently, like the past few years, I've been able to narrow that down more and be more focused. But I think that was always something that kind of held me back from the motivation. Well, like I want to do this, I want to do that. Now it's like, okay, the priority is I want to keep finding ways to make uh, money. Like I want to have a consistent day job, which I do, and like I'm finding more ways to make money in that way and everything.
Yeah,
But I also in the near future, in I'm not saying near future. I mean like now I'm still like submitting to roles, auditioning. Like I want to be a working actor. I want to keep getting roles. I don't see myself necessarily being like the biggest star, but like at least a working actor.
yeah,
And I want to eventually get into SAG. And a lot of people don't like to do commercials, but there's a lot of money in commercials. Like, and
sure.
that would help fund the other things. Like, especially if you're in SAG, you get residuals if you do one commercial. So I want to keep doing that. But the writing I know is more long term. So I'm kind of on the side. Like I have a story I'm writing, like a novel that eventually I want to produce into like a television show. And I know that'll
Mm,
be like a long term. That's a more long term thing. The acting
mm,
and auditioning is more short term. Like I can do that now, like auditioning for roles and kind of
yeah,
um, getting myself known in the industry that
mm,
way. And then the podcast is something I can do more short term. It's consistent. Like I can do that every week. So it doesn't really exclude, like I can still do this podcast, get it out there, and then still audition for acting roles. Like
yeah,
I'm not podcaster guy 24/7 podcast. Like,
yeah,
there's no reason why you can't kind of do both. You just kind of have to fit it all in, and then have the consistent goal with it. Because like you look at like someone like Mark Maron, like he's actor, writer, He's not just a podcaster. There's a lot of people
Mhm.
in the entertainment industry that don't just do one thing. They have
Yeah.
kind of different. Joe Rogan. I know he started as an actor on news radio, and then he was like a
Mhm.
UFC commentator, and
Yeah.
now he's a podcast.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. And that's variety. So, the one, my personal sort of mantra recently in trying to figure out my long term goal is wealth through creative variety, because I do want to, find a space where I'm not necessarily concerned with you know, there's a certain culture of wealth that focuses on maybe a lot of like the showiness of it, like literally being like the same way someone can be like, I'm into rock and roll or I'm goth or whatever. There's like wealth and there's a way of displaying that. And that's not what I'm interested in, right? There's a certain type of person who seeks whether they have the wealth or it's just, they're just,
Well, it's
presenting
good to not
that.
have to worry about money, but
Right. But then
like I'm
there's,
kind of the same way. Like I want to not, I want to be able to have as much financial freedom as I can, but
yeah,
I'm not looking to be fancy schmancy with it
yeah,
and live in kind of a gated community. Like I like being around different kinds of people. I like
yeah,
being around working people, real
yeah.
people. I don't really like super like status conscious people that are just like, look at my car and
Yeah,
my,
exactly. And
like, yeah,
that is like, and it's occurred to me. That's what I realized too. Like that is it's I want to call it almost like a subculture in its own right. Like there is that, like we show our wealth in this way, the same way these
mhm,
you know again go back. It's like your rock and roll, your goth, whatever.
yeah,
At a certain times, like we wear spike necklaces or ball chain necklaces. Like when
yeah.
I was in high school, whatever. It's like they show off their wealth in this way. It's a culture thing. That doesn't mean that that is a one to one with actual wealth in regards to being able to be essentially financially independent, where you're not always trading your time for money, where you're able to help
Yeah.
yourself and other people
And,
pursue their interests, right? And that's kind of where I lean
yeah,
into
and a lot of people I of course I want to have a good amount for myself, and if I go the route of having a family one day,
yeah,
family and all that too. But like
yeah,
I also, if I had more than other people I know, I'd want to use it to give back too and
yeah,
help and
yeah,
you know,
100%. And there's room for that. The thing is that also I think a lot of um, we grow up with a certain idea that wealth equals this sort of like ultra rich, ultra like famous, like celebrity kind of status, whatever. But wealth doesn't need to be that. Wealth can be that like you have notoriety because you are good at what you do and people can appreciate you and you are able to give back. And when you give back, those people are aware of who you are. And there are many like levels in which you people have that sort of success that isn't just a like pop culture type of success, but really does mean that you have a lot of creative freedom, that you do create a lot, that you do have no worries necessarily about covering your bills, and that you're able to have that momentum of creativity feeding your ability to then um, take care of your life and your loved ones, and help boost up other people that are so inclined to relate to you. And that's sort of what I envision for myself. It's so, and the reason why I mentioned that to you, one of as we both share interest in Mitch Horowitz, he often talks about having like that one focus like goal for all your things. And I can't do that. I can't pick one thing. I can't pick just programming. I can't pick
yeah, I
just
can
drugs.
relate.
I
That's been
can't
my
do it.
yeah,
I've
that's been
tried it.
yeah.
That's not me. But what I can do is pick one goal, which is wealth through creative variety. So to me, that's my one thing. I need that creative variety, and I need to find a way to do that in which the pieces are manageable, in which I feel an amount of success and in regards to making the quality that I could envision in my mind, and that I'm able to again turn that into a way in which my financial obligations are covered, and hopefully more, so I can build more things that I enjoy to make better experiences for other people too. Right. So that whole interplay of pieces is my one goal.
Hmm.
But there's different aspects to that are
But then you also, well, I mean, I'll let you get.
yeah,
Sorry to cut you off. You can finish your point after, but you also had that plan B, like you're a programmer, that way of making money. Like I
that's
know
my
that it
base.
sounds like you're more passionate about the other things, but you have that to fall back on, and that's a good thing to have too. Is that especially when you're a creative type.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I had to get from being like working, as like a dental assistant to being like, I need something else. And I have these creative things, but not any one of them was necessarily something that I could rely on to give me a financial or career, just anything that I really needed. Dental assisting, like, is actually like, it's actually a really hard job in the ways that a lot of jobs are hard, but what I mean is that the flexibility that you want, that you might need as a creative person, is not the kind of thing that you will get working as a dental assistant. And for me, there also is like a pay ceiling that you'll hit like fairly quickly, at least in my case, where I was probably, which I'm thankful for. It wasn't a whole lot, but I definitely made, like, if you look at like pay scale calculators, how much can you get doing this job? Like, I actually thankfully found myself above what even like the top usually would be, but it wasn't that much. Um, I had to, switch careers because I had at least, I don't, not to knock it, and I'm glad for the time that it served a purpose while I was doing it, but I don't have any real interest in. It's not like I'm like, yay, dentistry. Some people are passionate about that stuff. I needed something that I cared at least a little bit more, something that I could put a little bit of my heart into. And is not every project that I've worked on in and of itself, it's been so amazing, but the idea of programming, the process, what I've learned through that, and there's
Mm-hmm.
far beyond that, other ideas that fall within computer science or any sort of engineering, the principles that could extend, that I learn about, writing, something for a website, and I get better about that, and I understand, just a better process in breaking down and solving problems that kind of expands beyond that. Like, these things are really fulfilling and really have helped towards the other plans that I've had.
Yeah, if you could kind of tie if you have a day job, you can kind of tie into what you're passionate about. That's
Yeah,
a really
yeah,
good thing
exactly.
because
And I've met great people and learn a lot more stuff. So, for instance, something that I kind of extended into, for over the past week, I had this project that I worked on called like the temporal radioscope, and it was this what if device. What if Doc Brown, Back to the Future, created had a prototype device before the time machine, which, hey, in any engineering, there is a process of, you don't just start here. You got to prove your concepts. Like, how does he go from, if I type in a certain date, how does this device know to take me to that date? How do I go from keypad to date? There has to be a process in learning like what
Mhm.
that would take before being like, I'm going to move an entity from now to that date.
Yeah.
So in this device, it was this kind of like what if device where he figured out how to pick up broadcast signals from the past. And so in doing so, he was able to learn what it meant from going from today to that time in the past. I put in this date. Is it right? Well, let me go check the news. If I have the right date, I have it right. If the date is off, then hey, I got the wrong date. I got to recalibrate my system. And that eventually kind of builds hey, I can just, get from, I know what now is, and I know what that date is, and I can get there. But in doing that, I started, actually, this didn't make it to the final version so far. I still have to do it, but I built a controller and started off as a MIDI controller, but actually, like, I want buttons so that I could use this, what looked like a ColecoVision, which is like a competitor for the Atari, like an old video game system. And I want to build a controller that can move through this website thing. So I build a website that looks like an 8-bit
Huh.
old thing that you can click different videos, but I don't want to use a keyboard for it. I want to build an external controller, and I want to put that inside of an old video game controller so it looks like that's what's controlling it. The basis of what I've learned for just like web development type software engineering, like principles and things that are involved in, that are much more than just like, hey, let me show this image on a page, um, help me lean into this creative project where I'm able to build an external controller, and then we use these things called
Yeah.
microcontrollers called Arduinos. They're kind of like Raspberry Pis. For if you're not familiar, they're, some people would probably hate me for making that comparison. They'd be like, they're not Raspberry Pis. But if you're not super familiar, that's the best way I could describe it. And it's
Hmm.
something where you learn how to wire up buttons and lights and stuff like that. So getting into that physical, uh, excuse me, what I've learned for building websites is started to extend into learning how to build, like, if I press this button, I can make a computer do a thing, which for some people would be like, so what? But for me, I'm like, this is magic. This is amazing. Why did I even go down this train of thought? There was something about, yeah, I kind of lost it. There's a reason why I told the whole story about building this. I think it just goes back to the the programming part being a basis for that creativity, so that I could start
Yeah.
extending what I'm doing into other areas that I feel creatively fulfilled that are based on that. I couldn't necessarily do that with like dental assisting.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and also I think it's the time we live in too. Like I feel like it used to be like everything's just so expensive now, and
Yeah.
I feel like there's I think a lot of it has to do also with like the how big corporations have gotten too, and kind of taken over everything. Like I
No,
feel like it's harder to just it's more challenging to kind of have that. Like I feel like there's a lot of more people in that spot than there was like in a lot of other times maybe or
well, you mean in regards to um, having not creative fulfilling jobs or the expense of doing something creative?
well no just like being in a spot where it's hard to make your like your passion your living or it's hard to
Oh, sure. I mean,
yeah because I feel
that,
like there was a time where things were less expensive and maybe it was easier to
I think
do that in
that,
some yeah.
not that I disagree with that, but I also think that part of, and it's not a problem, but is that more people today who have that creative drive are actually able to try and pursue that. And so there are many more people involved in creative areas, which also makes it somewhat difficult. In the past, a lot of people either didn't have the access to, or never would think that they could, would have that really not encouraged by the people around us. Like, as much as I have struggled to create things and have had certainly doubts from other people placed on me, I think that there are certain areas where doing some of this stuff is almost impossible. Having, because today having a home studio, being able to like just build, buy, like record your own music at home at a professional quality would be like unheard of at a time before. Having, being able to buy electronic components and like put together your own stuff, to be able to do a lot of these things without specialized high knowledge, high like training, and doing them on your own is more accessible than before. So in a certain way, I would almost say that it's it's hard to make a career out of some of these interests because there are also a lot of other people doing similar things out there. So there's more competition in some ways. That doesn't mean that you can't do it,
You know
but I think that, at least from my point of view, that's one take too, is that there there's more
but I feel
options
like
for
it's also like
people.
the cost it's also though the like the cost of living you need
Yeah.
more to get by now than you used
Sure.
to
Yeah.
like
And
you
it's
need more
hard when you
to
spend all your time and like people like, oh yeah, like 40 hours a week is nothing. And then when, especially if you're in New York and you add in 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours for a train ride, in and out, and a lot of jobs are go way over. It's not like, oh, 8 hours. Like a lot of jobs, especially if you're in the like, working class, whatever positions, you kind of get like a little bit of abuse in the sense that like, yeah, we'll stay another hour, stay another 2 hours. What's the big
yeah.
deal? You need to sleep, you need to eat. You have very that those hours that you're given left for yourself outside from like your job that you're taking to get by are not your best hours. They're not the hours where you can think and create and do your best. They are like running on fumes, barely able to like maybe your body hurts, maybe your mind hurts, depending on what you're doing. And so it's really hard to do what you have to do for a full time job, which is what you need if you're lucky enough to like get insurance and pay your bills and do all that. After that, you're not really left with much for yourself in order to try to like
Hmm.
create things that you want to create. I definitely experienced that a lot, and I'm pretty grateful now to have a remote job, so I don't have a commute, which I'm thankful for. That's something that, but I worked really hard to get myself in a position where I can have this. I took a lot of quitting dental assisting and then saying I'm going to go to coding boot camp. It was like that's a big risk, especially when I already have bills. I'm already married. I already have like things
Yeah.
going, and to be like I'm going to throw it all towards this like dream that I don't really know a lot about because I didn't know a lot about programming before that. I thought I liked sitting on computers and making things like music or editing videos, but I didn't. What I thought I knew a little bit about programming, but I would say this: what I thought I knew, they could have taught in half a day in the course that I took, and where it's a 3 month course, so I
Yeah.
didn't know shit. Um, but
But
taking that
also
risk, Yeah.
I know like the a main thing we wanted to get into though too was like I think we talked a little bit about like finding that kind of meaning, that purpose that goes
Yeah.
that could be there whether you're happy or sad.
Yeah.
And then also during those times where you feel unmotivated, like there's good and bad ways to cope, and a lot of people turn to alcohol and drugs. And I know you
Yeah.
went through AA, and you said that that changed a lot. That actually kind of affected you in a positive way, and that kind of goes with my view of how like there's always like the light and darkness kind of need each other to go exist. Because I realize, a lot of good things only happen because there was a bad thing, and that led
Yeah.
to a good thing, and it's like
Sure.
they kind of need each other, like the yin and the yang.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so
And
hard
if
to see
everything
that
was
when you're
good,
in it.
you wouldn't appreciate it as much if without I
Yeah.
feel like it needs. Yeah.
And I think it's both right. And I can tell you a little bit about my experience with AA, but I think it's both right to say something was wrong. It shouldn't have happened. But because it happened, I have this benefit and therefore have, can learn and grow or do something that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. I think you can hold both those things true because if you accept, it's sometimes hard to be like, well, if things were different, then, or rather, for me to feel good about what I gained means that I have to say what happened in the past was good. And you don't have to. You could be like, that was shit. That was terrible. That should never happen to fucking anyone. But also, since it did happen, I learned and grew in this way. And so I can appreciate that. I think both of those things
Yeah.
can be true. And sometimes it feels hard to accept that where one feeling feels like it could block the other. I will say, as far as, AA goes, I have a disclaimer that I always like to give because in AA, it's not really thought well upon to, essentially stop going, right? And I don't go anymore. I'll be forthright about that. And I always say that if I had to go, I know it's there and I appreciate it. I'll also say that I am sober with a lowercase s and that I don't drink alcohol now. I know where that place like brings me. I have no problem drinking. For me, I have no problem drinking non-alcoholic beers. I have no problem taking prescribed medication from my doctor, which is another conversation we can have. I have no problem with something which I haven't taken in a long time, but like psychedelics, like I think they're fine
Mhm.
in my book. I can't really smoke weed because it makes me incredibly paranoid, but if it worked well for me, I probably would. And I love, there's this place called Elevated Kava over here that makes these kava and kratom drinks, and I have one of those once in a while. Totally fine with that. There are pretty hard lines in what I know are substances and things that are like bad for me, and ones that like I actually can enjoy, much like someone enjoys like caffeine or whatever. That is not for a lot of people. That might just be like, fuck you. You don't need to know what you're talking about. Some people might think that it's a terrible influence. Some people might be like, oh, thanks. Like I really needed to hear that because, I feel shame about wanting to enjoy like a kratom or trip something, but like, have the psychedelic experience. But, I feel bad because
Well, it
of,
could be. It depends. Like that stuff can be good. Like if you use it in a way that's like okay,
absolutely. I say
if
it
you
like a
have the right
knife, man.
intention with it.
We all have kitchen knives. You could kill someone with them, or you could like enjoy your dinner. Like you gotta.
Yeah. Well, and
There's a part of you that's
if you
got to use
have
it
no
right,
other direction in life, and then you just indulge in that, then that can be kind of
dude.
then that's a
I
negative thing.
I self medicated
But if
with.
you use it to kind of I guess supplement would be the word what you're already the positive things you're already working on, and to kind of
Yeah,
help you have a boost with that,
yeah,
then it could be good. If it's done with the right intention, I
yeah,
think it can work. And
absolutely.
of
And that's
course,
like
it
anything
affects
though.
different people in different ways too.
100%. Same thing though could be said about food. Same thing could be said about caffeine. Same thing could be said about really like anything. It really is finding that balance or temperance in situation and knowing
Yeah.
what could be a danger for you and what is okay. But all that being said, there are how to say this. So there are certain things you learn from AA and other spiritual practices where when you are like stuck or when you're hurting or when you um, feel blocked in some severe way where you learn how to get through those in a healthy way. Some of the very least, there's internal and external ones. One is learning how to speak about it. I considered myself like an emotional hoarder and I didn't realize it. It didn't matter if you like, till I could not say the words of the things that were like really hurting me. Like it was so nearly impossible for me to do that. And I learned through AA how to just, you know, say the things as I was feeling them. They don't have. There's not a right way to say them. It doesn't have to be encouraging. It doesn't have to be anything. It's like, this is what I'm feeling. Here's why. There's been plenty of times where I've had a conversation just like, oh, hey, man, it's like me and a couple friends talking on like Skype. It's been a little bit. And I was like, hey, guys, I just got to say right now, this is when I wasn't working. It's like, I'm just getting hit with a crazy amount of anxiety over work. I'm having a hard time just pretending to be okay. I don't even need to go into this right now, but I love you guys and I know you love me. So I just need to say that right now my head is spinning on this. And I just, I don't want to make it awkward. I'm not sitting here quiet or doing anything. I want to engage. I want to have a good time, but this is on my mind. Just being able to say that and not even have to make it a thing. They heard me out. They're like, you need to talk about anything else? Like, not really. I just needed to say that this is, I'm very preoccupied by this. And they're like, cool. And we went back probably talking, I don't know, Mighty Max or something silly, It was just, I've learned through AA to just say what I'm feeling. That on its own, so powerful, because I also learned
that's
that
something that's helped me grow too, is being
yeah.
able to say what I feel more. Like I think there was a period I kept myself hidden because I thought maybe when I was younger, maybe I was too out there and too eccentric. And then in my young adulthood, I feel like I held myself back by kind of hiding who I was a lot. But now I've kind of found that balance of being vulnerable, being who I am, but also kind of listening and being empathetic and knowing when not to speak.
It's funny you say that. I literally did the same thing. I definitely was like, I felt like so wild and so just like, oh, I'm going to just be as crazy as possible. Really, that was just masking a whole other way of not knowing how to express myself. So let's just be as weird as possible. But then once I kind of recognized that wasn't like healthy and that the trouble that I might have like caused myself and annoying to maybe other people, I reserved and I fell into this other state, also not great, where just like, couldn't express anything and just like really became like really reserved and unable to just, express those smaller things. So again, going back to that sort of like temperance of finding that middle space of just not being too much, but not being too little. It's not always perfect. It's not like I'll always express the right. Can I overexpress? Sure. Can I keep things to myself too long? Sure. But most of the time I can get that space where I can say something aloud. And I've learned to be very true that some of those dangerous mental spaces I've ever been, where I was in actual danger to myself, had been where I couldn't even say the things aloud to anyone. If I could express myself to someone else, no matter how bad it is, then I always have that room to like kind of like let out that pressure and like figure things out. If I can't say what's going on out loud to someone else, then that's like, that's when the like danger alarms would be like going off, where like, it would not, where we'd be really not in like a healthy space.
And I feel like we should end maybe telling people advice, I guess, if maybe right now they're feeling stuck or they're feeling a lack of motivation.
Yeah.
And
express yourself mine would be you wreck yourself, man. That's a sign I'm going to put up. I haven't even talked about our store over here, but I mean it too. I have a sign that we're making for the shop over here. So maybe next time I'll send you a picture, but it literally, kids want to like express yourself before you wreck yourself. If you can't get it on a piece of paper, you can write it on paper and burn it. You could say it out loud, record it on your phone, and then delete it. You can say it out loud to someone that like you trust. To me, it's like you got to like be able to express those things to someone if you're stuck, no matter what it is, in a way that you can release that in the most one-to-one into words what you're thinking, in a way where you're not censoring, where you're not changing it, where you're not trying to make it sound better, where you're not giving disclaimers. You just need to get the thing out that's within. And if you have a hard time doing even that, which I did, is getting into the space where you're saying, like, you have to be willing to do that, because willingness is like the precursor to any of this. It's like, am I willing to do this? Even though I'm struggling to do this, would I do it if I could? Would I be willing to express myself if I knew how to express myself? Because if you're not willing, if the answer really is no, then there's literally nothing anyone or anything can do for you. If you are willing but you just don't know how, then you're starting to open yourself up to like, I have questions. And if you have questions, you can have answers. I'm willing. So I need to find it. Like, if I'm willing, I can say, how do I learn to express myself? How do I resolve this? If you can start to ask the questions, and you may not have the answers, but if you're not willing, you can't ask the questions. If you can't ask the questions, you can't get the answers. So that's where I could trace it back to just like the smallest point, and do that in whatever way is safe. So like I said, if it's writing on a piece of paper than burning it because you aren't comfortable with anyone accidentally finding whatever it is you wrote. That's fine. If you record it on a voice recorder on your phone, so you said it out loud and then you delete it after, that's fine. It's getting through those first pieces, I think, that are a good way to start resolving some of those.
Well, and also I think it's staying on your purpose or staying on a project you're passionate about.
Yeah.
On those times when you don't feel like doing it, I think the way to make yourself feel better is to just do it, even if you don't feel like doing it, and then you feel better. Because there's been so many times, like some of my best episodes have been like, what's the point of me even doing this show? Like, and then I do the, and it's like, I don't know if I feel like doing this episode. Like I was actually even kind of in that mood today, and then it's like we had an awesome conversation that works that probably a lot of people will get something out of.
Yeah,
and even when I was kind of in that rut, like it was hard to. I mean, I was trying to book some guests here, and it was hard to get. And then like I had done a solo episode. Like, do I want to do another solo episode? And then my co-host has been busy, so it's been hard to get to do one with him too. But then as I was feeling that way, I was looking, and it's like people are still listening to this show. Like I still had like 100 downloads last.
It's awesome. Hey man, if there's one person, literally one person that was feeling like shit or unmotivated, whatever, and they're improved by what you've created, that is really the most important thing, right? Like that, it doesn't have to be. And you said if there's 100 something, that's even better. It's not about, the stats as far as being like, I'm better than this one or better than that one. It's about the fact that you're doing something that means something to you. I get to do something that means something to me. And there's the potential that there is maybe one person out there whose day could be a little improved or perspective a little bit improved by anything that we've expressed. Then that's a win, right?
And that made me think of something else, like how my thoughts always been is I'll say when I make it big rather than if, when.
Yeah.
My thing will always be to never forget your friends, never forget the people who loved you when you were nobody.
Sure.
And it's like actually in the long run, even when you are somebody, like those people are always going to be worth a lot more than the ones who just want something from you when you're something. So.
Yeah, no, that's true too. I think that, I have a hard time and I'm learning to like be better with it too. This is a whole other topic you go into, but essentially, nurturing and maintaining the relationships that are important in your life with those people that are close. They are, again, they are above and beyond any sort of relevance to your success or lack thereof and whatever time you might be. It's like those are your people and they're the ones that you honor, love, and respect, and hopefully they love and honor and respect you too. And if you're doing well, they're there with you, and if you're not doing well, they're there to like support you, and that's through and through. And then any one or that comes from there, you will hopefully not fall into a space where you misread someone's intentions. They're only there if you're doing well, right? Because they're only looking for something maybe for themselves, and that's a whole other
that's what I'm thinking. Like like a lot of this pickup stuff, they say all this stuff like, oh, if you do get this and that, you'll get more women. Like they want a guy who's the high status, and I can understand. Of course, nobody wants somebody who's like has no direction and or whatever, and is like a complete like doesn't want to do anything with their life. Well, actually, there are some people who do like.
Sure, I think that's it. Again, that puts the whole relationship thing into like that other category. Like I was saying, there's that sort of.
Then it's like, do they really like you for you?
Culture, that's like
you want someone who only wants you for that. Like,
No, I think that. It's certainly that would be like you wouldn't want someone who only wants you for the things that you have, but like for the person that you are and the person that you are, maybe they do want a person who can like accomplish things or keep goals or be financially secure.
Like someone who likes you for who you are, but also sees that you have the potential to be even better. And like you see the same in them because it's a two-way thing. Like you want them to accomplish their dreams.
That's me and Dana. That 100%. And
I was actually thinking that because she has her creative pursuits too. She does her art
or literally, she supported me when I needed to go back to school and said I don't want to be a dental assistant anymore. I'm going to quit my job and go to this coding boot camp. It's going to cost $15,000, which is way too much money. Like I've never spent that much on anything maybe other than a house recently, which totally other story. But now in reverse, I've always supported her and her art pursuits. And, we'll save this for maybe next time, but we're literally in, her store right now that we just like opened, which I don't know if I really told you about, but it's Magic Rocket Vintage. And it is a it's a art and vintage store that she's been working on selling her art and vintage stuff. So now we actually have a store where she has that and a lot of other friends that she's made in through like doing markets and stuff like that in the community around Asheville. And like we're only in the place we are by supporting each other and seeing more in each other than we have right now, and like really helping each other reach our potential. And it's paid off so much for both of us. That's very different than someone who
Yeah.
only wants someone for just what they have in the moment.
It should be a partnership, like a two way thing. Like you're
100%.
each other's equals.
Yeah,
There's just not
100%.
a higher and a lower in the relationship. You're both
No,
they're supporting each
it's
other.
interdependence is the word that I like to use, because it's like,
Yeah.
yes, we do rely on each other, we need each other, but it's not dependent in that I can take away from her or she can take away from me. Think like we help build up each other in our independent ideas, and sometimes we cross over. Sometimes there are like this store being something that is both of us working really hard on. It's mostly her thing, but this room, it's coming together. It's my own little it's a little mini museum of stuff. Got this Twin Peaks looking going. It's in progress, but it's coming together. And then I'll show you real quick too. Might as well, keep this in or not. But here's the store that we built together, which is like,
Yeah, he's showing me on the camera for those who can't see.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's coming together, man. But this is all from working hard with each other.
Yeah.
It's not always perfect or easy, but we get very much both dedicated to helping each other succeed. So, yeah, man.
And that's the best way to be. Like you can, and that's why you can have the same relationship with yourself. You can love yourself as you are, but that doesn't mean like, oh, you have to stay completely as you are. But you can also know that you can be better than this. You're capable
That's right.
of more than this.
You can't hate yourself into someone that you love, is what I've learned, right? So you don't get ahead by shitting on yourself. You get ahead by accepting yourself and then knowing you can be better, because acceptance doesn't mean, and therefore you don't need to improve or don't want someone else or yourself to improve. Just because I accept you or accept myself doesn't limit myself from then improving. In fact, that's a way towards improving, starting with accepting yourself, which is hard. I've learned that instead of waking up in the morning and telling myself horrible things that are not in my best interest, but in a certain way make me feel better, that before I go to sleep, I tell myself good things that almost uncomfortably so, like, you're a good person, you are succeeding, people love you, like things like that, which are so like cheesy, but like are very difficult for me to do.
Do you find that brings you positive outcomes, like in your day to day?
It helps. It definitely is a better experience than telling myself in the morning, you're a fucking piece of shit, I hope you die. Or like terrible things, like, you know what I mean? Like, it is definitely, I think I sleep better. And if I sleep better and then wake up a little bit better, it's a better practice than
the part of it's like letting go of the past too. Right? Like you might have failures in certain areas in the past, and then you expect
that's what I struggle with a lot too. Man, we should bookmark some stuff for another podcast. There's a few different ways in which I feel like I've worked through resolving feelings on mistakes that I've made in the past, from minor ones to, I mean, it's usually minor. I mean, there's a few big ones, but not really. The ones are usually like, they are the things that to someone else would be like, that's literally nothing. But for me, it's easy to like obsess over. And I've had to work through a lot of those. But yeah, we can talk about that one for sure another time, because there's a few good practices, I guess you could call it. But that follow, where it actually helps me like it's like self-therapy stuff, and kind of like work through those feelings.
Well, I'm glad we had this chat. I feel like not only maybe we helped the listeners, but I feel like we kind of helped each other through this chat too.
Yeah,
that's at least my
100%, man.
Because we're both in kind of a similar mood, like not feeling motivated, and now I feel more motivated.
Sure, and that alone is the thing, man. If there's anything that's sometimes hard to like put into words, because it's almost like meta about itself. It's literally doing this, where you didn't feel up to it today, I didn't feel up to it today. We both independently are saying like, hey, let's do this anyway. That sort of becomes a topic that created this experience, and now we can walk away. Hopefully someone else can get directly from something we said, or just knowing that we kind of push through that feeling to then say like we accomplished a thing and then can move on from there and have that feeling of that success, like, okay, I
Yeah.
beat past those feelings, I can do stuff even though I don't feel like it, that are good for me. Getting into that space is so important. This being an example of that, I feel like that's a win. And it doesn't have to be pretty, it doesn't have to be like, it's not like I said everything just the way I wish I would have said
Yeah.
it. It doesn't have to be perfect,
And
but we
the
did
more
it.
you focus on the small wins, the more they build into big wins. I think the
Exactly.
problem is people put high expectations too high, and they focus too much on the bigger wins right from the start. But you're not going to see the big wins take time.
Yeah.
It's better to think in small steps and
Yeah,
think
I
of
agree,
small
man.
wins.
This is small win, but small ones add up to big wins. So, yeah, small win, but we did it. So, you know, yeah,
Hell yeah! And I hope you all enjoyed listening to this episode of Let's Talk About the Deep Stuff. I'm gonna get back into trying to at least be bi-weekly with this, if not weekly. And check me out on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Also social media. Let's talk about the deep stuff. And that's about it for this one. We'll catch you on the next one.